Grace and peace. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist Campus Minister at Drexel University, and this is Peace and Power Christian Fellowship. The peace of Jesus Christ to change your life, the power of the Holy Spirit to change the world. And we are continuing our series on the Sermon on the Mount, the greatest speech ever. This is the first week of lessons on this and the third video this week. And we're going to be looking at the content and going to be creating a division, breaking it down, showing how the Sermon on the Mount will be divided up and how we are going to go over it through this video series. Now, question for you and suggestion. If you've never read the Sermon on the Mount in one sitting in its entirety, or if you haven't read it recently, or if you just want to do that again, I strongly suggest sitting down and reading Matthew 5 through 7, found in the Gospel, found in the Bible, found in the first section of the New Testament. Read it through in one sitting in its entirety. If you are somewhat average of a reader, you'll probably be able to read it in about 20 minutes, and it isn't that long. It's it's 3 chapters, it's 111 verses, and you should be able to do it in about 20 minutes. Just to check it out, just to see it as a whole. Quite often we quote a lot of the Sermon on the Mount: love your enemies, turn the other cheek, go the extra mile. But we don't see it as an entirety. The Lord's Prayer, we'll pray that all the time, but how does the Lord's Prayer fit into the overall structure of the Sermon on the Mount? Where does it fall in? Or are these just separate structures kind of taped together to create something that looks more like a bunch of sayings than an actual sermon? I believe that it is a cohesive sermon with a train of thought that moves from beginning to end as we look at it in its entirety. So I suggest, if you want to do that now, hit pause. If you want to see that after we go through the content, that would be great as well. So first of all, there are 3 sections to the Sermon on the Mount. There's the introduction, which we can find in Matthew 5, 3 through 20. There's the main body of the sermon, which is found in Matthew 5, 21 through 7:12. And then there's the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, which is found in Matthew 7:13 through the end of 7:27. And we can see that Matthew and Jesus intended to set these sections up because of this inclusio, this way that it brackets these passages. 5:17 talks about, don't assume that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And then 18, 19, and 20 builds on that idea. So that section right there is about the law and the prophets and how what Jesus is going to say relates to those. And it goes through a lot of these, mentioning different laws, mentioning different religious things, mentioning ways to practice being a good follower of Christ in relationship to the law of the land and the law of the Old Testament. And then in 7:12, it wraps up that sermon body with, therefore, whatever you want others to do for you, do also the same for them. This is the law and the prophets. So we see Jesus say that he has come to fulfill the law. And then at the end of the body, he says, this is the summation. This is the summary. This is how you fulfill the law. And everything in between kind of deals with that idea of fulfilling the law. Before that, 5:3 through 16, 5:3 through 20, sets that up, and after that 7:13 through 27 says, okay, now that this is true, this is what you must do in a conclusion. So that's kind of how it breaks down in a general setting. Now we're going to break it down much deeper than that and look at it in some specific things. So looking at this, looking at the introduction, that 5:3 through 20, first 5:1 through 12, we're going to look at who is blessed, answering that question, who is blessed? And the Beatitudes go over that. Then this 5:13 through 20 is going to be looking at what it means to fulfill the law. That will be lesson 2 and lesson 3. Moving on to there, we got the body of the story. There's the heart and the law. That will be lesson 4. We'll talk about things like murder, adultery, divorce, honesty, revenge, love your enemies. And each of these sections in this lesson 4 starts with this sort of similar pattern. You have heard it said, but I tell you. Every single one of those sections says something like that. Then lesson 6 will get what is true religion, looking at giving, fasting, praying, how we're supposed to do those sorts of things. In the middle of that is the Lord's Prayer. And then chapter 6 ends and goes into 7:12 with this, what does it mean to trust God? Money, do we trust God more than money? What does it mean to worry? What does it mean judging other people's? And there's this asking, seeking, knocking sort of stuff. How do we look at God that way? Along the way, we'll have these 2 special lessons that kind of springboard off of the content. We're going to talk about sex. Okay, I'm a campus minister. Sex is a big thing, talking about with students, and in the context of adultery and divorce, building out of this idea in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to use that to dive deep into not only what Jesus teaches, but how that relates to the entire scriptural teaching about sex. And then we're going to do the same thing about money. Okay, no one can serve 2 masters. You cannot love God and money at the same time. Well, as we're college students, as we're developing this idea of a career and developing the ability to earn money, how does that relate to the rest of our faith? So these will be 2 specific times when we springboard off of the Sermon on the Mount into one of the topics the Sermon on the Mount deals with much greater and greater detail. And then we're going to look at the conclusion, which sets up 2 ways. There are 2 gates. There are 2 fruits, good fruit and bad fruit. There are 2 foundations. The gates are wide and narrow. The fruits are good and bad. We see the wolf, but he's in sheep's clothing, wolves and sheep's. We see the 2 foundations, the rock and the sand. And the conclusion calls us to make a choice. So that's the outline of what we're going to be doing in this series as we move through the Sermon on the Mount. It will build on each other. We can see that the idea that the Sermon on the Mount talks in a consistent way through the entire subject, really, really developing these ideas in a way that the people would be able to remember them and understand them, but there's enough there that they'll be able to dive into it time and time and time again. So, homework, if you didn't already do this, read some or all of the Sermon on the Mount each day this week. Just spend time in the Sermon on the Mount. Listen to Jesus' words. If you are a Christian, I strongly recommend you study the words of Jesus in a way that you're able to quote him as if you would quote your favorite movie, your favorite song, your favorite author, your favorite speaker of any kind. Be able to quote Jesus. Show him the respect he deserves as the greatest preacher that ever lived. Also the Son of God. We quite often believe about him with faith, but don't respect him in other ways that way. Quote Jesus, read Jesus, study his words. As always, there are 3 ways to join in-person Sunday nights at 7, live Monday nights at 7 via Zoom, and then these weekly wrap-ups on YouTube and WordPress. I'm all over the social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, and YouTube. If you're somebody who just watches these videos online and I really don't engage you in person or via video, if you're not really connected to the ministry in ways that we know each other, do not be afraid to drop me a message in the comment section of these videos or follow me on these social media sites. I am doing this mainly to connect to the students at Drexel, but if you are following us in any other way, I would love to hear from you. Drop me a line and let me know you're out there. Talk to you later. I enjoy these conversations.